Here in the second of our extras, we're going to be seeing how you can use version control with your Android apps. And specifically, we're going to be using Git, which is a very widely used version control system. I'd thoroughly recommend using version control if you're working with particularly a large project. It enables you to go back to previous versions of your app, and it also makes it much easier for lots of people to work on the same app and then merge their results and the work that they've done into a final product. So if you want to read more about Git, then go to git-scm.com and check out the about pages and the documentation if you like. But really, I'll show you all the basics of what you'll need in this video. You might also need to download Git if you haven't already worked with any kind of version control. Then it will detect the system that you're on. So just click download for Mac or download from Windows and just download the latest version and follow the instructions to install it. That's pretty straightforward. All right. So working with Git in Android Studio, we'll create a new project to do that. And remember, the aim of this project is not to actually get an app that does anything, but to see how we can use version control to make our development process smoother and to allow us to revert to previous versions if we've done something horrendously bad, which happens to the best of us occasionally. Okay, so I'll make all my changes in our main Java file, but you can use version control on all of the files within your app. So to start off, we go to VCS or version control system and enable version control integration. Simple as that. And then select the version control system you want to use. And we're going to use Git. And there we go. So already we now have a Git repository in our app folder. And this will then save all of the versions of our app that we work with. So how do we set this up? Well, first of all, you'll notice that everything is red at the moment. And this is because we haven't added anything to our version control repository. So if we just click on version control there, we've got nothing in default there, but we've got 35 unversioned files. So the first thing we're going to do is select our whole app and add it to our version control system. So we go to VCS and then Git and then add. And now you can see everything goes green and it's all been added to our version control system. In fact, there are some files which haven't, and these are ones which we're going to opt not to have in version control because that can cause problems. We're going to be working with the defaults there, which are all the sort of files that we work with anyway. Okay. So a key aspect of working with version control is committing. So once you've added all your files, we then want to commit, and it says commit changes. We haven't actually made any changes yet, but this is our initial commit to get everything started. So this is all of the default code, and whenever we commit in Git, we give a commit message, which is an instruction that just sort of lists the details of the particular commit. So this is our initial commit, which just means that we're stating our first version, essentially, of our app, which in our case obviously is just the default app. Then we can have a little look at that if we go over to log, so we can see what we've done so far. So you can see we've got the head, which is where we're working at the moment. We've got the master, which is the main branch that we're working on. We'll talk about branches in a minute. And then we've got our initial commit. All right, so how does this then all work? So let's say we write a little bit of code. Let's create a string user equals Rob. So very simple, probably not something that you would want to commit after. You'd probably be confident enough that you could undo that line of code if necessary. First off, notice now as we're writing code, this green bar is coming down to show us that this is new code that has not been committed yet. And if we write some code in here as well, we'll get a similar if we write some code in there, that will appear there too. So this shows us the new code that we haven't committed yet. So let's pretend we've written some fantastic code, we're pretty happy with it, we've tested it, and we want to commit it. So once again, we just go to VCS and commit changes, or indeed Command K, or probably Control K on Windows, and then we commit that, and I'll call it added user Rob. And then we'll commit that change. There we go. And if we have a look at the log now, you can see we've got our initial commit and then we've got our later added user Rob commit. And hopefully you can start to see that then looking at this Git log, you'll then get a nice picture of how your app is developed. And maybe if you think back to, say, our Instagram app, we might have had the first commit connected successfully to pass. The second one added the login screen. The third one added the user table, etc., etc. And then you can see each stage of the app and, very usefully, go back to them if you want to. So let's say, for example, that I now write some more code. So I'll create another user is Kirsten, blah, blah, blah. And I might even delete my initial code. And then further down the line, I decide, actually, I want to get that initial code back. How do I do that? Well, if you weren't using Git, you may have saved another version, or you may be able to use Command Z if the memory is long enough and you haven't gone forward too far. But if you're using Git, then you can revert to a previous version, which is extremely useful. So to do that, you just go to local changes here under version control, click on the file that you want, and then control click or right click, and then revert. And that will then take you back to our previous commit. And you can breathe a sigh of relief and you've got your code back as it was. So that's one great use of version control, to be able to go back to a previous version and undo the changes that you've made. The version control that I want to show you is how to use branches. Now, branches are controlled down here. So at the moment, we're on the master branch, which is the kind of default branch, which you should always stick with in the long run. But we might want to create a new branch. So let's say we want to test some kind of integration. So this might be testing Facebook integration. So then I might go off on some wild tangent and see if I can make Facebook integrate with the main app. And that might not involve just adding code. It might involve getting rid of some code, changing things all over the place. But I want to still be able to revert back if I want to. So this is a grander thing than just doing another commit. And if we now look there, you can see we're on this testing Facebook branch. So if I now do a couple of commits, I'm just going to do comments this time. So we'll do a quick commit there. Give it a message, FP is great, comment, and then commit. Oh, I think I managed to type there too. Then maybe later on I decide it's not so good. So let's commit that. There we go. And now, if I now have a look at the log, You can see hopefully what's going on there. So the master branch ended there, and then we switched over to the testing Facebook integration branch. So as always, I could revert back to the added user Rob, but the really useful thing is if I eventually decide that I've completed my testing Facebook integration, so I'm done, and I then commit that. Then once the testing Facebook integration is completed, I can then merge this with the master branch. So we can do this here, and you can see that when you tap on the branch button there, then you'll get all of the other branches. So we want to take the master branch, and one option is to check that out. So if we check out the master branch, it'll take us back to the master branch, and we could start working on that if we wanted to. But let's just go back to our Facebook branch for the moment. So if we want to merge this with the master branch, we go back over to master, and then we can click on the other branch and then merge. And that you can see that's brought the testing Facebook integration branch into the master branch. So we're now back working on master again, and everything has been brought together. So it's a great way to work on a specific feature on the side of the master branch, and then only to bring everything back in together again when you're convinced that the new feature works well and you do want to integrate it into your final app. So those are the basics of using Git version control with Android Studio. There's a lot more that you can do with it, so do a bit of Googling and work out how it might be most useful to you. But those are the features that most developers use most commonly. I hope that made sense, and I hope that version control saves you from some disasters and helps you to work more collaboratively in your app development career.